We're now going to edit an image in Adobe Lightroom. So I'm going to edit image number 2, but I'm going to do it as a virtual copy. So I go into Photo, down to Create Virtual Copy, and I have a second image. Now it doesn't make a true duplicate of it. It's virtual in the sense that the original image is still there. It creates notes about this new image so that whenever I look at it, I'm looking at a like a temporary modified version of it. Double click on that. If I move my cursor up, I have the option to develop. I'm going to develop my virtual copy as a black and white. The colors are still going to be there. They're just going to be hidden. Most of what I'll be doing in Lightroom is on this right-hand side. I'm going to scroll down, and I'm going to choose Profile Corrections and go to Sony. Sometimes Lightroom is correct in choosing the actual lens, and sometimes it's wrong. In this case, it's actually wrong. I was using a different lens. So if I like this lens profile correction, I can keep it. I could just unenable it. I could actually change the distortion or the vignetting myself. Remove chromatic aberration is great for color images. It really doesn't matter for the black and white image we're doing now. All digital images can be sharpened. Depends on your JPEG settings. Sometimes camera's set to do a lot of sharpening in the camera, sometimes not. I prefer to do it myself in Lightroom or in Photoshop. For sharpening, this would be more of a typical setting I would use for sharpening. I don't need to do a lot of sharpening on this image. It looks pretty good otherwise. If it wasn't, I could crank up the amount and maybe go up a little bit on the radius to make it sharper, but pretty much all digital images could use a little sharpening to it. All right, as I go up higher, I'll show you some options here. Exposure allows you to go overall brighter or darker. If I double click on it, it returns to the 0 point. Same for contrast, more contrast, less contrast. Double click, goes to 0 point. If I want to make just my highlights or shadows lighter or darker, I can make those changes as well. Clarity changes a lot of the mid-tone contrast. It's very good if you want to bring out detail on wood or on skin. What I'm going to do, I think, is go down to my region for my curve line. So if you use Photoshop, you're probably familiar with the curve line. I like it here in Lightroom, and I can just go to the region, and I can move the curve line without clicking on it, but by using these sliders, which to me is great. I like it better than clicking on the line. I can still go in there and futz with it if I want, but this is nice and fast. So I want my image to have some contrast, but it also feels like it's too contrasty. So I want to make sure I can see some detail in the flag. I can see the light hitting the flag, the pattern of the flag. I do like that. But overall, to me, it seems a bit harsh because of down here at the bottom of the picture. So there's a couple of things I can do. One, I can go to the crop tool. I click on the crop tool, and I can move the handle up. When I'm done, I click done. Now let's say I did that crop and I don't like it. I want to go back. The nice thing about this is you can. I click on it again, and I can go in and just adjust that. Click done again. I still have access to that original frame if I wanted to recrop. Maybe I even think, hey, what if I come down here and crop? So you can play around with it, see how you like it, and go back. The other thing I'm going to do is go to the adjustment brush. That's to the right-hand side. I click on the adjustment brush. It allows me to make changes to small areas, or even in some ways large areas, but this isn't for overall picture change. This is for specific areas. I've set my shadows up, so I can click in my shadows, and I'll lighten up my shadows a bit. And the nice thing about this is I can go into that slider, and I can play around. And that would be without any change, making it darker, actually changing it to darker, or going all the way to making it a bit lighter. I could also go up here to exposure and do the exposure tool, and that would let the re-click. It'll lighten the areas I've already clicked. I tend not to use exposure as much because with that target circle, most of the impact is where that those crosshairs, that plus sign is, and then you have less and less impact outside. But even when I try to lighten the ground, I'm bound to touch upon the flag a little bit. When I was just doing shadows, it didn't really matter. But if I do exposure, then some of those parts of the flag, and you can see right here, now the flag is being affected in that outside area where the circle was. So I'm going to bring that back down to where it's barely noticeable, the change, but still brings in a little more detail down here. Then I'll click Done. So that's how I could edit this black and white image. Now, if I look at it and say, there's something wrong, overall I'm okay with it, but what if I wasn't sure about these stripes in the background here? One thing to remember is this really is a color image. You're just not seeing those colors. I can scroll down. You see where it says black and white. Well, the flag has red and white stripes. If I move the red, I can see anything that has some red is now changing. So I can make it more contrasty in the stripes if I want by moving that down. In the blue, I could go to blue on the slider. So the blue of the flag, which we know is against the stars, I can move that blue slider and I can make some changes that way too. It's not as pronounced in this photo as the red, but I can make it a little bit lighter, bring it out a little more. That's one more thing that you can do in Lightroom. This was a quick tour, and you'll see different options when you look at someone, maybe me, edit a color image.